This happened to me when I was around 16 years old. I was a teenage boy living near Arlington, Virginia with my parents. We also lived about a mile from my aunt's house. One evening, well after the sun had gone down, my dad and I were driving home from a baseball game. We were coming up to my aunt's house when my dad pointed out the front window towards my aunt's yard. "Do you see a man standing there?" he asked me. I look up to see a dark figure standing in her yard, just looking at her door. We pulled up across the street from her house and my dad calls over to the guy. "Hey, can we help you with something?" The guy doesn't move an inch. We can see him better now, and he's wearing jeans, a dark hoodie, and a brown jacket. He continues to stand there as my dad calls out to him again. "Hey, that's my sister's house. Does she know you?" We wait for a reply. The man doesn't say anything. He doesn't move a muscle. He just stands there, his arms rigid at his side and his head slightly cocked to the left. He's still just staring at the door, not moving or saying anything. After trying another time, my dad begins to open the door of his truck, growling, "That's it, I'm coming over there, so you better..." He didn't get the chance to finish because at the sound of the truck door opening, the figure turns on a dime and begins sprinting at an unnaturally fast pace towards our truck. He rushes forward, his head still cocked to the side, and one hand reaching out towards us. My dad slams the door and floors the gas. I never stopped staring at the man as he continued running after us down the suburban street, every so often getting a good look at him as he passed under a street light. His face was unnaturally pale, and his eyes looked black in the dim streetlights. He ran without slowing, one arm forward and the other swinging wildly, following behind our truck. We eventually gained enough speed that we lost him, but I didn't stop looking out the back of the truck. His face haunted me. I felt like I couldn't look away, that he would suddenly rush back into view and charge back after us. He hadn't slowed. That wasn't possible. No one could run that fast, and certainly not for that long. My dad snapped me out of my trance, shaking my shoulder. "You need to call your aunt, find out where she is. I'm gonna drop you off and go back for her." I picked up my father's flip phone and dialed her number. It takes several long seconds, but that felt more like hours before she answered. She answers the phone, assuming it's my father. "Hello, Brian." "Aunt Lizzie. It's me, Quinlan. Where are you?" "It's important," I speak in a panicked voice. "Visiting your mother. I'm at your house having dinner. What's wrong?" I tell her what we saw outside her house, and she doesn't believe us at first. After my dad and I insist about what was outside, she finally seems to believe us. She gets a little freaked out, and my father insists that she spends the night with us. Later, we're back at the house, and they're all debating and discussing what the guy might have wanted, and my aunt tries to argue that she'll be fine. It's around 1:30 a.m. when she finally accepts the offer to stay, and we set up the guest room for her. Everyone goes to bed after we get my aunt situated in the guest room. It took me what felt like hours to fall asleep, but once I finally was, I awoke with a sudden jolt. I immediately looked at the clock, and it read exactly 3 a.m. I felt uneasy and didn't know why I woke up. I looked around my room and couldn't see anything out of place. I lifted myself up enough to look out the window next to my bed. I pulled the curtains aside, and what I saw haunts me to this day. The man was standing in the middle of our yard, staring directly at the guest bedroom window, the window right next to mine. I was terrified and furious at the same time. Why was he here? How did he find us? How did he know which room my aunt was in? I leapt out of bed and grabbed the bat beside the door to my room. My terrible mistake was not going to my parents' room to get my father before heading downstairs to confront the man. I get to the bottom of the stairs, brandishing the bat, feeling confident about my ability to scare the man away. That, or we were going to have a serious problem that he would regret. I land on the bottom step and take one step towards the front door when I see him, no longer out in the yard, but directly at the door ahead of me, staring right at me with his dark, black eyes. It felt like he'd been waiting for me to come to the door and let him inside. He had his head cocked slightly, just like before, just staring at me. I was frozen with terror at the sight of him. His face looked like that of one of those department store mannequins, plastic and motionless. As the image of the man washed over me, I realized he didn't have eyes, and the space where they should have been seemed like two empty, black, endless cavities, void of all light and unbelievably hollow, impossibly empty. He just stared at me without moving as I stared back at him. His face seemed unnaturally smooth, yet rigid like a mask, but there were no edges. It just seemed to meld down his neck and under his hoodie. His entire head, a mask of plastic. The even creepier part was that his neck and chin seemed to have cracks running down that didn't seem to have anything under them but the same black void the eyes had. Suddenly, the doorknob started shaking viciously as he stood still, not moving his eyes from my own. But then he suddenly moved, his hands waving, gesturing towards me and then to the doorknob. We stared at one another. He continued to shift between shaking the knob faster and faster and beckoning me to open the door. I felt a hand tap me on the shoulder. I leapt sideways, attempting to swing the bat against whoever it was. It was my father, and I realized I had no longer had the bat in my hand. My father asked me, "What the hell are you thinking?" in an angry whisper. I realized then where I was. I was not by the foot of the stairs anymore. I was now only 2 feet away from the door, and the bat was lying on the floor near the steps. The man outside the door was still standing outside, looking at me and my father as he moved between me and the door. The man returned to his motionless stance until suddenly he shrugged as if to say it was worth a try, before turning and slowly walking down the sidewalk from our door. My father and I watched him as he walked slowly into the night. Before he disappeared into the darkness, he turned and waved at me, peeking around my father's figure to look directly into my eyes once more. I realized as I moved away from the door and back into the kitchen that it was now 5 a.m. To this day, I still have no idea how I got from the bottom of the stairs to the door without remembering moving, without feeling the time slip by. I don't know what would have happened had my father not come downstairs. If you ever see one of these plastic figures, these mannequin men standing outside your home, don't make the same mistake I did. Don't confront them alone. Don't look at them. Don't talk to them. Just hide. Hide and pray that the mannequin man just goes away.